So we got Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Elizabeth Moss, Jenna Elfman, and I could go on. There's about another 30.
Yep.
These are celebrities in Hollywood that joined Scientology. How did that happen?
Well, there's a Church of Scientology Celebrity Center in the middle of Hollywood. It specifically caters to VIPs and celebrities. It
Uh-huh.
offers acting workshops and ins to the industry through the Scientology celebrities who they use to do workshops and seminars for up and coming people, but they're really Scientology recruitment seminars and, this kind of thing. They've been playing and working the Hollywood field in the industry for decades now. L. Ron Hubbard first wrote in 1955 a list of celebrities he wanted gone after. And he said, we got to get these guys because you get one of them. And one, favorable comment from them on TV
Oh,
or
yeah.
radio.
Extreme
And
marketing.
yeah, we're going to have, 500 new members.
Trigger warning, this podcast contains mature themes and discussions of cults, manipulation, and trauma. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Cultimatum, the culture of cults and human trafficking, where we expose the dark side of control, manipulation, and the human stories behind them. I'm Anonymous Andrew, executive producer and investigator into cult dynamics and coercive control.
And I'm Melody, a cult survivor and advocate for awareness and healing.
This is Cultimatum. Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Cultimatum podcast, the culture of cults and human trafficking. And my name is Andrew. And boy, do we have a special guest for you tonight. And my co-host Melody is here, and she is going to tell you all about him.
Yes. Today we are joined by Chris Shelton, a former Scientologist with nearly 3 decades of firsthand experience inside one of the world's most well-known high-control groups, including 17 years in its elite Sea Org. Chris brings not only lived experience, but also academic insight with his master's degree in coercive control and offering a deeper understanding of manipulation and influence. He's the host of Speaking of Cults, a consultant on the Leah Remini Scientology, The Aftermath, and a dedicated advocate supporting survivors every day through his online work and outreach, not to mention his new book. Chris, welcome to Cultimatum.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Well,
We're excited to have you.
Are we? And when I said we have a very special guest tonight, I was referring to that you are our first ex-Scientologist guest.
Yes.
I made that mistake earlier. Yes, welcome. And I also just learned that I asked a silly question before we started recording, like, you can't be born into Scientology, and that just shows you how maybe naive or ignorant I am about Scientology, that I was corrected that it started in 1959. So, yeah, you were born into it, correct?
I was, yeah, and just to be, whatever, it was 1953 is when the Church of Scientology was incorporated, and yeah, my folks got involved with it when I was still just a very young little boy, 3 years old, 1973, and they ended up working for the church in Pasadena, and I grew up in it. I grew up around it, and not the heavy duty billion-year contract thing. Now, my parents didn't do that. They just worked at the Pasadena Church of Scientology, and so I grew up very, very much with a social circle that was all Scientologists. And yeah, but I also went to public school and stuff like that. So I had kind of one foot in both worlds as a child, and then as a teenager is when I really started getting involved.
Scientology, for me, has always been a mystery. You've heard about it.
Yeah.
As a younger, I would hear about it, but had no interest because that was something, another lifetime. Now, over the last couple of years, it was very much of an interest, but I don't know anything about it. So can you, in a few words or a few paragraphs, explain it's a religious cult and there's churches all around and it's not just based in California, right?
That's all correct. It is a religious cult. It is also could accurately be referred to as a money-making scam.
Yes.
Because
Okay.
that is kind of the nature of the thing. It runs on a business model. It sells materials and services to its parishioners, and yet it uses religious cloaking, religious language, and icons and whatnot to present itself to the world as a religious group. And it has a belief system or a belief set that is very much centered around each person as a spiritual being. It addresses you spiritually. It doesn't address your body or your bodily concerns so much. There's lots and lots of rules in Scientology about what you can and can't do with your body, but um, but it's not, but it is a religion, or it's gained religious status in the United States and some other places in the world because it does have a core belief set that involves spiritual rehabilitation and improvement and promises. Ultimately, the ultimate goal of Scientology is personal spiritual freedom and immortality. So,
And this
kind of
all
lofty
came
goals.
and this all came from Ron L. Hubbard, and
L. Ron Hubbard.
L. Ron Hubbard.
That's right.
I'll get one of the facts straight tonight. Uh, he wrote a book, or he's the one that just started it? I know
Mhm.
we spoke earlier that you could do a whole episode on him, but let's just do a
Sure.
brief little bio on him.
Absolutely. L. Ron Hubbard was born in Tilden, Nebraska in 1911, grew up in the Depression era as a writer, pulp fiction writer, and gained success with that and maintained a career doing that. He went into World War II and became an officer and commander of a boat, which he quickly lost command of through incompetence. And after the war, he was kicking around in Southern California and came up with a mental health technique, so called, which was Dianetics. Dianetics was a book he wrote in May of 1950. Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health, is the full title. And this really took people in America by storm. It was a bit of a fad for about a year. People were really into buying this book and working with another person who'd also read the book, and they could do this procedure on one another, which was called auditing. And that is something that they still do. It went from Dianetics, which within a year had been panned by academics, psychology critics, Time Magazine, etc. But Hubbard sort of kept it going with a very, very small number of followers. But he was basically kind of rip and running with all the money. He'd go to a place where they'd set up an organization for Dianetics, and they were kind of trying to get it going. And he would give lectures and talk about technical advances. I'm using air quotes here because he was just making all this stuff up as he went along. But the Dianetics part went bankrupt, and so in 1951, Hubbard got a bailout by a millionaire, an oil guy out in Kansas, and showed up out there and set up what became what he rapidly morphed into the Church of Scientology. He went from a science where he was making claims about curing cancer and leukemia with Dianetics techniques, and you just can't do stuff like that. The law
No.
has a very clear idea that if you're offering cures to cancer, in 1951 especially, nobody wanted to hear that. That was illegal, and so they were coming after him, and he went, "Oh, okay, how do I do this? Oh, religion. I make faith-based, and I'll get tax breaks, and I'll get First Amendment protection, and I'll get all of these goodies in America under the First Amendment if I start a religion." And he's famously quoted correctly and multiple times as saying, if you really want to make money, start a religion. So that's what he wanted to do, and that's what he did. And so in 1953, we have the Church of Scientology Incorporated. Him and a few other people started this thing up, and it grew very, 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 very slowly to start. But he kept going, kept persisting, kept building on these groups, and built it up to eventually a network of churches around the world. And there's a lot of history to it, but that's basically the origin story.
Good. All of that is completely unknown to me, although I remember Dianetics. I was born in 1960, so
Yeah.
I not at 5 years old, but I think it was still around, like, in the 70s.
Oh, it's still around
Yeah,
now.
it's still
Oh,
around
yeah.
now. So
Dianetics is a part of the Church of Scientology. The
okay.
book is still pushed, the techniques are still pushed. But Scientology took the auditing procedure, which is basically covert hypnotism, and came up with and developed many, many, many more techniques from it. And so when you go into Scientology, you are climbing a ladder of indoctrination, and it uses this auditing process to sort of convince you that you are improving spiritually, and that's why you pay all the money.
And just to clarify for any of our audience that may not be familiar with some of the Scientology tactics, I'm going to say, would you agree with the statement that most of the time the information that they would gather during those sessions was a lot of time used in order to blackmail people or keep them in the organization or used against them if they tried to leave?
It would be used against people to quiet them if they leave and are complaining, to be very precise about how Scientology uses that material.
Okay.
There are not people in Scientology is not a con that wants to blackmail you into staying. They want you in a fervent state of emotional awe and reverence,
Okay.
and very, very, very much they want you to believe in it. But if you leave, if you see behind the curtain, if you start noticing the authoritarian overreach and the controls and the endless, endless pressures for money and time that they try to extract from you, and you just go, "Hey, I can't deal with this," and you hit the eject button, and you start speaking out publicly against them, suddenly all that information that you gave them in confidence, well, guess what? There's actually a legal contract you signed as a Scientologist that gives them control over all of your written secrets that they've been keeping on you all these years.
Mhm.
The auditing process, just to be clear, is an incredibly intimate and transparent process where you are expected to give over and say everything that has happened in your life. And, we can get into this, but also into past lives. So
Right.
this is how they're accumulating information on you, is you're just telling it to them. And there are
Right.
lots and lots of forms and tests and other things that they do on you, that gathers information as well.
Well, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to your story, and then you also have a book, if you would like to get into that. He's holding up his book. It is called
It's called
What
What
now?
Now? A Practical Guide to Life After a Cult.
mm,
This is my second book. My first one is Scientology A to Xenu, an insider's guide to what Scientology is really all about. So this I wrote 10 years ago as an effort to explain Scientology. This is not my
Ah,
memoir. This is a breakdown of the subject. And there's an index and glossary and chapters on the tax exemption and on who L. Ron Hubbard was and what it's all about, what Dianetics is, what Scientology is. I do a
what I
whole breakdown in here of all the confidential Xenu stuff. So
is it a negative approach or a positive? In other words, would I buy that if I was thinking about joining them and I wanted to learn, or it's more of a like stay away approach? Like
Well,
read
it is
this
a
and you'll be
critical analysis of the Church of Scientology by a former member who was involved for, working for the church for 25 years and has a few things to say about the experience.
gotcha. Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It's, pretty raw, and I'm trying very hard in that original book to be as objective as I could about it. It's not just me ranting about Scientology. I offer a lot of facts, a lot of research on what it is and what it's all about. And then 10 years later, just a few weeks ago, I published my new book, which is not Scientology specific, but has to do with all cult recovery of any kind, religious or non religious, political, all of it. Because after, all these years, I escaped Scientology in 2013. So it's been, I guess, 13 years now that I have been working on recovering from Scientology, and having accomplished a lot of goals and sub goals on that process, on that road, I thought I want to give people advice about that. And so that's what this new book is about, is not my journey, not here's what you need to do. It's more, here's what I wish somebody had told me the day I got out
I like
about
that.
how to navigate life
Mhm.
outside of a cult. What is trauma? What is critical thinking? What is emotional intelligence? You're going to hear this stuff, but what is it? What is it?
Yeah.
How do you find community? How do you find a support system? what if your family isn't that much into you? What if they're still in the cult? You need to come up
Right.
with something else. So there's a lot of advice in here about how to deal with that.
And
And
in
also, oh,
some
sorry, go
cases, it's like we've had people come on who left, like, the Amish community, or they may have left
ahead.
some other really old-fashioned cult that didn't allow, like, so people get out. There was a woman we had once that she said she saw her first movie at 32.
Mhm,
She
mhm.
because they weren't allowed to go to movies.
That's right.
So,
Yep,
yeah,
I've interviewed
interesting.
people on my show who've had that
Yeah.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah, and after all these years, I learned an awful lot. I mean, that's what's in this thing is it's not just my experiences. It's I've interviewed psychologists, sociologists, psychiatrists, neuroscientists, as well as many, many, many ex-cult members from lots of different groups. So this is kind of an amalgamation of all the lessons, all the
yeah,
stuff I've learned over a decade, and hope that I can offer people as just a, hey, here's what I didn't know. I think this will help you if you know this now,
yeah.
Right.
sort of approach, right? That's my take on it.
Which I think, Melody could have used,
Oh,
what,
absolutely.
20 years ago, and a lot of the
30.
guests 30, so that
Yeah.
the guests that we have that are just getting out,
Yes.
there's a range, and we have people coming out just last year or whatever, and I think that book would be great. Anyway, back to your story.
Yeah.
So I think you said 1973
Mhm.
you were born?
That was the year my folks got involved in Scientology. They had been divorced. After I was born, they got divorced, and then my dad, basically, they got involved in Scientology, and they got back together. And so I grew up telling people and thinking, "Oh, well, the only reason I have a family is because of Scientology. Go
Mhm.
L. Ron Hubbard," right? But what I didn't realize is my parents are great people, and I have a great relationship with them, but they should not have been together. And and after I left home, they did divorce again because they really didn't want to be together. So Scientology really didn't do us, big favors with that. But whatever, you live and learn. So I
Right.
I I grew up with this, and that means that I learned a lot of vocabulary, a lot of concepts, a lot of ideas that were straight from L. Ron Hubbard. And we didn't have idols or pictures of L. Ron Hubbard in the house. Nobody worships him. It's not quite like that in that group. It's more like he's viewed as this, amazing humanitarian philosopher, genius guy. And he's passing on all these teachings to us through the books and the lectures. And that's what I started consuming as a teenager in high school is when I really started doing classwork. And Scientology is basically a religion of very little concepts of faith or belief. It is a faith based religion. There are things you absolutely have to believe are true that you have no proof for. But Scientologists frame it in their mind as scientific. There's a lot of pseudoscience in Scientology. So it's a mixed bag of a lot of different things. So my beginning into this was through communication and taking a communications class and learning how to talk to people. And this was when I was still in high school. So I was keen to learn how to talk to people so I could get dates, things like that. I was a pretty nerdy kid. So this is what appealed to me about it. I wasn't looking for personal spiritual freedom and immortality. I was looking for how to get a date and how to get along with people better. So my 15-year-old self just gravitated right to the sales job that they did on me, and I eagerly got on board, and my parents wanted me to get on board. So there were social pressures as well. 2 years later, after doing a bunch of beginning classes and work in it, I started working for the church. They recruited me right out of high school to work there. And this was in Santa Barbara, California, where I was what's called a staff member. And that's where you basically sign a legal contract that you're a religious volunteer. You're not entitled to any pay, health benefits. There's none of that. You're a volunteer, you get what you get, and you're going to be happy about it, right? And so I did that for 8 years. And when I was 25 years old, I went down to Los Angeles and I joined the Sea organization. That's SEA organization, as in the ocean. It's a paramilitary outfit that L. Ron Hubbard put together in 1967, and it's uniforms and ranks and ratings and yes sir, no sir, how high sir, and they live on these Sea Org bases, those big blue buildings you might have seen pictures of in Hollywood, California. is a Sea Org base right in the middle of Hollywood. It's the old Cedar-Sinai Hospital complex. And I lived and worked there for 17 years. And it's like a little world all of itself. You are in a self-contained bubble world when you're in the Sea Org in that space. It's
What's
not
their
a 9 to
purpose?
5 job, it's a 24/7, 365 job. You're on call all the time.
To do
And
what?
your workday is basically 8 in the morning till about midnight. So 7 days a week. There were opportunities for a day off once every 2 weeks, maybe. The last 5 years that I worked for the Church of Scientology, I had 5 days off in 5 years. So there was not a lot of time off. It was a lot of work, a lot of physical demands. Um, and it's a long story, but bottom line is I went from staff to Sea Org. The Sea Organization is the group that signs the billion-year contract of commitment, right? I'm in it for this lifetime and every lifetime after for the next, billion years. So I was very, very, very serious about it. And the way I describe the Sea Org now is it's kind of the fanatical level of Scientology. Like you really, really got to believe.
But what was their purpose? Like you said, it was paramilitary,
Uh-huh.
and so were they the guardians of Scientology? What did
No, the Sea Organization, maybe I don't fully understand the relationships, but I believe that it would be analogous to the Vatican of the Catholic Church. It's the central command authority. It
okay,
is
good
the
analogy.
promotion center. It is the place that produces all the videos. They produce literally in-house publishing facilities to print all the books and make all the CDs and DVDs. They do all of that in-house. And the Sea Org is the group that does that. It's about 4 to 5,000 people
So it's
worldwide.
like it's corp headquarters.
Basically, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
and there are these bases all over the world. They do also deliver the highest levels of Scientology. So when you hear the Xenu story, you watch South Park and you hear about these high confidential levels of Scientology, the Sea Org are the custodians of those levels. They don't go down to the city level churches. You have to go to the Sea Org to get those services. And they cost a lot of money. It's thousands
Oh,
of dollars an hour to do that stuff.
of
So
course.
so that's where the big money is made is on the Sea Org bases. And we had quotas sometimes of $1 million a week. Like we were pulling in a lot of money.
I want to rewind just a little
Yeah,
bit
absolutely.
because you kind of skipped over something that, and this is where the non cult survivor comes in.
Yeah,
All the I would say majority of cult survivors we interviewed, no matter what, Jehovah's Witnesses or whatever, growing up as a teenager, you were forbidden to to even look at the opposite sex. You couldn't spend time with them. You couldn't talk to
sure.
them. They were separated. If you did, there was this punishment. There was all sorts of different things. And you talked about, oh, when I was 15, my goal was girls.
Mhm,
You know, so
mhm.
did is Scientology was they didn't have any strict rules, like, they could the teenagers couldn't go to the movies, they couldn't own a cell phone, they couldn't listen to the
Right,
radio, all
right.
of this old-fashioned stuff. I would imagine none of that was you were allowed as long as you went to church and did explain that. I mean, was there rules? Could you just date a woman, and could she be outside of Scientology if you were in Scientology?
Mhm. Yes, there are not strict sexual regulation controls on teenagers in Scientology. It's not a Christian conservative, biblical literalist, evangelical,
Okay,
biblical memorization kind of Bill Gothard setup at all. There's none of that in Scientology.
okay.
But I want to be clear that there are different kinds of controls on your sexual behavior. And there's both writings from L. Ron Hubbard and then a systemic sort of enforcement of these rules from the new leader, David Miscavige, the guy who's, I say new, but he's the second guy. He took over in 1987, so he's not that new. But he's been running Scientology all this time, and he's even made it more strict that, for example, it's a little arbitrary. Here's the thing about this is at the lower levels, they're a bit loosier goosier about this. But when you get up to the level of the Sea Org and you show up on a Sea Org base and you're going to be in that environment, it's an environment of rigid, strict discipline. There is no premarital sex in the Sea Org. There is no masturbation in the Sea Org. There is no, adultery or dating outside the Sea Org or anything like that. And no hanky panky, no nothing. Sex is a very prescribed and limited behavior in the Sea Org because you just don't have time. And as a Sea Org member, once you sign that contract and show up on the Sea Org base, and that's your life now as you're working for Scientology all the time, you are forbidden from having kids. And so you have to do the birth control, or you have to get the vasectomy, or you have to do whatever you have to do. And this is where you might have heard stories about forced abortions. That comes out of this no kids rule that came into effect in the 1980s and really went into effect in the 1990s with a sledgehammer. I was in the Sea Org at that time. And it was very much, you are not having kids and remaining in the Sea Org. We don't have the facilities or the resources or any of that. So that's just part of the bargain of joining the Sea Org is no kids.
No,
And
no,
people
no
who do
daycare
have,
center.
I'm sorry?
No daycare center.
No, nothing like that. They had stuff like that in the 70s and 80s, and it was a disaster
I can
because they had
imagine.
no idea what they were doing. And they
Mhm.
really screwed up a couple generations of kids who were raised in the Sea Org. And these are you'll see and hear the horror stories if you go online about that. So that's why they put those rules in place. And it wasn't really doing anybody any favors to just say, okay, no more kids, but that's what they did. And that's the rule now. And that's why if you get pregnant now in the Sea Org, they'll basically try to talk you into or force you into getting an abortion. And then if it happens twice, then I've heard the rules now are that the male has to get a vasectomy, just to like absolutely, no more problems with that. And that's one part of the Sea Org control system that is enforced. There's no internet, very, very little internet. It is all censored. There's all kinds of information controls and thought control going on in that group. So that's part of it. But so I had to say all that because yeah, they're not doing the Christian evangelical thing, but it's not like they're not doing anything.
Right.
Sex
Right.
is one of the best ways you can control people in a group. And Scientology definitely has sexual controls.
But that was only the Sea Org members. So if you were
Pretty
before
high,
that,
yeah. Mostly at that level. At the lower levels, at the public level of Scientology, where you're just a paying member who's doing your services and stuff, they're gonna ask you about your masturbatory practices. They're gonna dig into your sex life. They're gonna know every single thing about you when you're doing your auditing and progressing up those levels of indoctrination.
to
They
hold it
call
against
it
you
the
later.
bridge to total freedom. Is the analogy. You're crossing this bridge to freedom, and it consists of these steps you have to take, and these are all laid out on this bridge. And so this is where these OT levels come in and stuff like that. Is those are all steps of this bridge. And so at the Sea Org, you have the tightest discipline, but the Sea Org enforces discipline all the way down the line. And so if you're doing something that the Sea Org doesn't like, you're going to have to stop doing that if you want to
Right.
keep doing Scientology.
I might be jumping the gun, but
Sure.
we talked about this earlier, and it's not being practiced now as much, but there was 10, 20, maybe 30 years ago where people would leave Scientology and try to get out or try to speak about it, and they were followed. We had stories, we've heard stories that
Hmm.
so was that the Sea Org that would go after somebody who left Scientology? So that was
Yes.
your job.
Yes. No, not my
Not
job.
your job, but
No, but it
Sea
was
Org.
a job in the Sea Org, yeah. The Sea Org has a division or a section, a subunit that is called the Office of Special Affairs, OSA. And OSA's job is to protect Scientology legally, to provide legal defense, and to anticipate legal threats or PR, public relations threats, and deal with them. And every single critic of Scientology, according to the church, is a PR threat. And they treat it very, very seriously. Scientology is It's an extreme group. And so they have
Mhm.
extreme beliefs about their critics. They believe that critics are all criminals. that they have left Scientology because there's something basically and fundamentally spiritually broken about them, and that they are actually sort of this evil inverted version of a person who they call a suppressive person or an SP. And this is a label that they actually formally assign you. And I have been assigned this label, for example. So if you're somebody who was in Scientology and you leave and speak out like I have, they will label you a suppressive. And at that point, you're disconnected, you're shunned, right? Nobody can talk to you. You lose all your connections. When I was declared, I lost my fiance. I lost people I had known for 20 years overnight. They were just, nope, I'm now ghosted. And that's very real. That happens. It happened to me. So it's all part of this SP package. And so yeah, it's pretty awful. And that's how that's another control factor for people is, well, I don't want to get declared suppressive. So I'm not going to speak out about the church. I'm not going to talk crap about it. I'm not going to leave. So there is that. But they really, like I said earlier, they really want you to be a true believer. They don't want to, strong arm you into staying. They want you to be in a euphoric daze about L.
Right.
Ron Hubbard and Scientology, because that's the state where you'll give over all your money. If you're being extorted, that doesn't work so well to get your money.
What decade would you say Scientology peaked? It was at its highest, strongest? Was it the
Well, it's a
'90s,
little
2010s?
controversial. Yeah, it's a little controversial. I think personally, my belief is that it was in the 80s, but there are people who have a good argument that it might have been in the 90s, but it was one of those two time periods where it really did hit its sort of, as you say, peak. Um, Scientology has ever had millions of members. That's never been true. It's never had 1 million members. I know the numbers, and the numbers are not greater than about 750,000. And that's just total number of people they ever sold a book to, ever contacted from 1950 to present time.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
So, that's not that they had 750 believing Scientologists, 750,000. They had 750,000 names of people who had bought a book.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? So,
So
yeah.
I want to back up just a little bit, Chris, because I
Sure.
know for me, when I left my cult and we were basically excommunicated or shunned, was it what was your reaction when you learned that other groups and cults use the same tactic? Because I know for me, that was like a really like an eye-opening experience to hear about how this wasn't unique to my group.
That's a great question because I remember to this day the exact moment of realization that L. Ron Hubbard was no unique super genius, mastermind, criminal, supervillain. That everything he was doing was following a playbook, a cult leader playbook, if you will. Cult leader 101. I started referring to it that way, the cult leader handbook or playbook or, that kind of thing. Because
Yep.
when you read and study the actual techniques and structures of these groups from a systemic point of view, not from a bad cult leader point of view. If you come off of how bad Jim Jones was and look at the system that Jim Jones ran with the People's Cult all the way to Guyana, you see a very similar structure to what L. Ron Hubbard put together, to what Bill Gothard aspired to put together with the IBLP, right, the Institute of Basic Life Principles, or what certain religious leaders do, what the Moonies got up to, what with the Unification Church, right, with those mass weddings and all that stuff, or what the Jehovah's Witnesses get up to. So and what Nexium gets up to, or Enron gets up to. Remember that old company? So we can see this structure, this sort of system fall into place in any group. And I have personally seen and interviewed people who survived cults that were in a martial arts dojo or in an
Right.
acting class. It all just depends on the relationship between the leader and the followers. And is it a codependent relationship? And is it us versus them? And, is there money or sex or power involved? There's a whole checklist of
Right.
things we use to nail down what we're looking at. And once you see it that way, for me, like I said, the moment I'll never forget it because it's so depowered L. Ron Hubbard as my cult guru and really brought him back down to earth as kind of an imbecile and not a really smart guy and not somebody who really had it together. And he really needed all these people around him to enable him to build
Right.
something permanent because he would never be able to do it by himself. And these kinds of things are kind of the journey that informed this book that I've just written, because it was learning
Perfect.
that kind of stuff that were milestones on my own recovery journey. And I think they could be for other people too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, I have probably a question that I have never understood.
Hit me.
Uh, okay, one of the ways that I learned a little bit more about Scientology over the years is watching something like a movie, and then you find out that the lead actor, like, and I just Googled some of them. So we got Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Elizabeth Moss, Jenna Elfman, and I could go on. There's about another 30.
Yep.
These are celebrities in Hollywood that joined Scientology. How did that happen?
Well, there's a Church of Scientology Celebrity Center in the middle of Hollywood. It specifically caters to VIPs and celebrities. It
Uh-huh.
offers acting workshops and ins to the industry through the Scientology celebrities who they use to do workshops and seminars for up and coming people, but they're really Scientology recruitment seminars and, this kind of thing. They've been playing and working the Hollywood field and the industry for decades now. L. Ron Hubbard first wrote in 1955 a list of celebrities he wanted gone after. And he said, we got to get these guys because you get one of them. And one, favorable comment from them on TV
Oh,
or
yeah.
radio.
Stream
And
marketing.
yeah, we're going to have, 500 new members. And sure enough, there have been a lot of celebrities in Scientology over the years. Most of them come and eventually leave. But you do have your diehards like John Travolta and Tom Cruise and Elizabeth Moss, like you said. But then you have people who leave, who like Leah Remini,
Like Leah Remini.
Right.
That was my
right?
next one. Yep.
That's right. She's pretty famous for that. But you've also got Beck. He's a pretty famous musician. He was raised in Scientology. He's not in Scientology anymore. He just kind of faded out of it. So you get some people who leave spectacularly publicly, and you get other people who leave, but they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to get into it, and so they don't.
You want to talk a little bit about Leah Remini? About how she left, and because I think I heard you say in the beginning, Melody, that you were part of her production company. Was that
I was a consultant on
consultant?
season 2 of Scientology and the Aftermath, which was just a fun position for me to be in. I got to be on the show twice, so that was fun. I was on season 1, and then I got to be on the season finale of the final season. Anyway, it was really fun to be part of an Emmy-winning series.
I
But
would
Leah
imagine.
and a former Scientologist named Mike Rinder, who has since passed away, a very, very dear, dear friend of mine and a really heroic figure. He had been involved in Scientology up to the highest, highest levels. He had been answering to the leader directly for many, many years. And he, in fact, had grown up on the boat with L. Ron Hubbard. So he had a long experience with Scientology and had a lot of things to say about it. And he and Leah, who Leah had also been raised in Scientology since she was a child in Brooklyn, and she had joined the Sea Org for a period of time. And she and I actually were kind of in for the same period of time and got out at the same time. We had a very interesting, fun little parallel journey. But of course, when she got out, she, really started speaking out. And she came out with her whole family. She didn't just leave and escape, by herself. Her mother was involved. She had her sister was involved. So she got them all out. She was like, "We're leaving. This is it." And she had a number of things happen to her that sort of opened her eyes to how abusive the organization was. And so she left around the same time I did, back in 2013.
So the next question you might not be able to answer. When she left and then started speaking out publicly, I'd be curious to know what Scientology or the Sea Org was in a panic? Like,
Oh, very much so.
yeah,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
and
When Going Clear was coming out, Scientology was in such a panic, and they are so incompetent at this that what they did was, so Lawrence Wright wrote a book called Going Clear, and I believe it was in 2014 or 15 that it came out. And Lawrence Wright, of course, is a Pulitzer Prize winning author who had, written about the 9/11 incident and all of the looming tower, right? It was a great book. And so he took on Scientology and wrote about it. And Alex Gibney, who's this, wonderful documentarian, took it on and worked with Lawrence Wright, and they made Going Clear, the movie, the documentary. And I really can't recommend anything more highly than Going Clear. If you only have 2 hours and you really want to get what Scientology is, that's about the best 2 hours you're gonna get, because you really get a very, very deep look at what it really is, not just the sheer veneer of it. But then Leah and Mike put together, a long series, a multi-season series, really breaking down Scientology. Let's get in some detail. Let's talk to all the survivors. Let's bring out all the stories. Let's feature professionals in the cult field and the psychology field to talk about this, and let's really explain it to people. And that was just a wonderful, wonderful effort on her part. And the Church of Scientology absolutely freaked out. So, like, for example, when Going Clear came out, they took out a full page ad in the New York Times, about what a liar Alex Gibney is and how horrible, this movie was going to be. And all that did was blow it up so that when the film premiered at Sundance, it
was a
was
smash.
standing room only, and they had to
Yep.
do multiple showings because everybody wanted to see it.
Now
So
backfired.
it was the most wonderfully orchestrated foot bullet I've ever seen, Scientology shooting themselves in the foot.
Yep.
So that was awesome. But behind the scenes, you have to know that Scientology was hiring private investigators and lawyers to go after Leah and Mike daily. They were getting followed everywhere they went. Their family was getting followed everyone. Their kids on their way to school were being
That's what I
followed.
was referring to earlier. Yeah.
All of that. They were going through their trash. They were, Leah Remini right now is suing the Church of Scientology and has been in active litigation with them for a few years now over all of the harassment and stalking that they engaged in. It's a matter of legal record. You can look it up. It's just hundreds of pages of social media campaigns tearing her apart, calling her a religious bigot and a hater and a this and a that, saying that she, just very, very morally offensive things. And
Well,
I know Leah Remini. She's a friend of mine. It's absolutely none of that is
No.
is true, right? But
well, the good
Scientology is,
news is she probably has a lot of that stuff on film because they were
oh yeah.
filming at the time, and so she has evidence of this. I mean, video evidence that this was happening. So
It,
that
there,
should work in
there's
her
no,
favor.
yeah, there's no question about all of that. It's a good case that she's bringing, but Scientology, of course, is using every delay tactic in the book because they have, again, the Office of Special Affairs handles all the legal, and they've been doing it for decades, and they have a very, very exact playbook as dictated by L. Ron Hubbard. And when they hire lawyers, those lawyers are indoctrinated in how Scientology does things. It's not like we're going to hire a lawyer and, oh, go take care of this for us. It's more like we're bringing you in. Here
We're
are
gonna
your
do it
marching orders. You go do this.
we're gonna do it our
Right?
way. Yeah.
Yeah, we do things our way, and that means that we're going to enter every delay tactic into your lawsuits. We're going to enter every single motion to dismiss. We're going to enter in every single legal maneuver we can just to delay, delay, delay because we have the money and time and resources to do that.
Speaking
And
of
that's
money,
what it is to take on Scientology. So
and so speaking of money, I where I hear in other cults that you have to put 10% tithe of your
sure.
income. What was in Scientology? Now we know that like Tom Cruise and John, they probably donated or gave millions of dollars, I would imagine, because
Mhm.
1 week at a box office, they could do that. So is that where most of their money today came from? Because you said overall there was only about 750,000 people that from 1970 or 60.
50.
Yeah, w but they're probably one of the most wealthiest cults out there today.
No,
Maybe
they
not
aren't.
so much anymore, no.
No, they're not even remotely close to the most wealthiest cult out
Really?
there. Oh, no. Oh,
Oh, I
no.
thought they were just so because of the celebrities that would No. Ooh, no.
Oh, no, 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 no. Um, if we're going to talk about wealthy cults, we'd have to talk about the Mormon Church. As far as
Oh.
pure wealth, we're talking
Right.
the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is sitting on hundreds of billions,
Billions.
hundreds of billions of dollars.
Mhm.
Scientology only dreams about having that much money. They have total reserves and assets probably somewhere around 3 to 4 billion, which is a lot. It's not a small amount of money,
Yeah.
but let's not, in terms of comparing things, the
Right.
Mooney Church, the Unification Church, right? The Jehovah's Witnesses are have far more money than Scientology
No
does.
kidding.
What
Okay.
Scientology brings to the table, and one of the reasons why it's so infamous in and outside of the cult world, is because it is known within, in this space as one of the most difficult groups to break away from and recover from. There are more mental, this isn't the trauma Olympics, and I'm not trying to make it that, but I am saying that from a professional point of view, when it comes to the levels of control and authoritarian overreach and sort of mental manipulation that goes on, there's more insidious double binds and mental manipulation tactics in Scientology than any other group I've ever run across. Some groups will take one or two techniques and they just run with it. Um, TM, right? Transcendental meditation would be an example. They're just meditating all day. That's all they're doing. There's not a
Mm.
thousand different ways to meditate. There's one way to do it, and here's your mantra, and here you go. And what we're going to demand of you is that you're going to sit and meditate as much as you can. And at the highest levels of TM, you have people meditating all day, to try to achieve world peace. I mean, they get pretty extreme about it. Scientology has somewhere on the order of about 400 or 500 techniques. There's just endless numbers of things that they're doing to you through this auditing process and through the training that they're giving you. So there's a lot there, and that's why it tends to um, be considered such a destructive cult out there.
Okay.
But my understanding is, and tell me if I'm right here, Chris, just from
Yeah,
what I know of Silent, most of their money, I think, Andrew, comes from them selling their classes, their books, their programs, and you have to keep paying more and more to go up the next level. And a
yep,
lot of people are going into debt for this. A lot of people can't afford what they're asking for, and they're putting this stuff on credit cards. So a lot of their money comes from that. Would that be accurate,
correct.
Chris? Okay.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And interestingly, Um, if you want the real skinny, what's happening over the last about 20 years is Miscavige has actually been turning status levels of donations or donors into a competitive thing where people vie for how much money they've given to Scientology through straight donations, not through I'm paying for services. You are expected as a high level Scientologist to do the services and go up the bridge, as they say. But you are giving so much more. You are being pounded on to give more and more and more for building renovations, for programs that they're doing that are supposedly, curing drug addiction or illiteracy or criminality. They have a lot of front groups that they use to reach out into society in very non-obvious ways. It's not obviously connected to Scientology, but they use those to try to, get people in. But the status game is the real stroke of genius because people are paying quite literally millions of dollars to the Church
Well,
of Scientology, and all they're getting in return is a title. They call them patrons, and they get patron status levels where you have patron meritorious, and then you have patron with honors, and then you have patron meritorious with honors, and then you have patron silver meritorious and gold meritorious and platinum meritorious, like these levels. And you have to give, $750,000, $1 million, 1,500,000 to get to these levels, and they give you a nice big trophy and stuff. So I'm only saying all of this to give you the real skinny is, yeah, they do the books and the services, but they've been making all this money off of just titles.
which I bring circles me back to the celebrities like Tom Cruise.
Right.
I'm sure
Yep.
that they donated
They can afford
yeah, they can afford, "Hey,
to buy their
here's
title.
5 million because he made 73 million on his last film," something like that.
Well, let's not forget the business people who are involved in Scientology. Tom Cruise is
Right.
actually not the biggest donor in Scientology, and if you
Okay.
think that that's
Yeah,
the case,
most
that's not
famous one,
true.
most
He's the
name
most
famous.
famous, but there's a woman named Trish Duggan. She is a billionaire. She has invested in, and she sits on the board of the Kennedy Center. She's
Okay.
deeply involved in MAGA, and she has given way more money than Tom Cruise has, at least as we publicly know through the
Yeah.
records. Not all of this is super transparent either. There are people who give money that we don't know their names because they want to remain anonymous too.
Yeah.
So it's
Which is
business people that are really keeping Scientology afloat. The
okay.
celebrities are absolutely part of that, but there are far, far, far more what we call Scientology whales.
Right.
Right, which is a Las Vegas term, right? When the high rollers would roll into town, those are the whales. Well, Scientology has its whole whale class, and they get the front row seats at the events. They get to schmooze with David Miscavige. They get all the goodies, and the VIP treatment, but they are literally paying in millions of dollars to pay for that privilege.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just keeping an eye on the clock, and I'm not really concerned because we have a very special guest today. So,
So we can go over a little.
but there's two
No
things
problem.
that I know. One you want to talk about, and the second thing I just want you to comment on.
Sure.
Number one is your book. So we want to get to your book, and
Mhm.
number two, we did this. We spoke a little bit about this in the pre-record. Is the raids that are going on now with the young kids or whoever, what do they call them? The mash mods or whatever,
Yeah, the speed runs.
the speed runs. What do you know about that? And is it hurting the Scientology? Is it really doing anything
It
damage?
it's having an effect. Okay, so kids are basically live streaming, running into a Church of Scientology, and in a very kind of gamey way, they're kind of playing a game in the real world, and they're trying to get as deep as they can into the church, and they will run through and they will basically trespass, bump into people, that's committing assault, various other things. And because Scientology is a religious group, formally recognized in the United States as a religion, they are also potentially committing a hate crime.
Um,
So there's a lot of reasons for them to not do what they're doing, and that's the reason I advise against it, is because we don't want people fighting Scientology by breaking the
yeah.
law. And this isn't fighting Scientology so much as it's basically attention-seeking behavior on the part of kids on TikTok. It's just a
Oh,
fad,
yeah,
right?
it's a
And
TikTok
that's
thing.
Right.
and
Yeah.
I'm not down on kids. What I'm trying to say is I know what Scientology is capable of. And so when you look at what happens to people who take on Scientology and poke that bear, you go down the road 6 months when all the cameras are gone and the fad is over, and those kids and their families are going to get embroiled in lawsuits and and
Mhm.
and religion and criminal prosecution that
Right.
Scientology is going to insist upon, and they're
Yeah.
going to
Right.
be within their rights to do
And all
so.
those lawyers in Sea Org
Right,
are
and all
gonna
those.
be the
Yeah.
yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
So
All right.
so I'm trying to give out a little word of caution, and I know that that's not well received by everybody because Scientology is such an evil organization, and it legit is. Don't get me wrong. I'm not simping for
Right.
Scientology
Yeah.
when I say this, but it's just not in your best interest to do that. And so while it might be having an effect on Scientology, here's my real point. Not one of the buildings that they're running around in matters to Scientology. So if they
Right.
close the doors of all those churches right now, none of the money would stop flowing
No.
into Scientology. It doesn't
Right.
get it from those
It's a
churches.
trend, so it'll end
So
Right.
when that TikTok phase ends and the new one comes up, and
that's
it
right.
could probably be happening now or in the next week or so.
We'll
Okay,
see. It's very
you
interesting because it could turn into something amazing if they became activists. Because
Mm.
that's what happened in 2008 with Anonymous and all the people protesting for a year outside of Scientology churches all over the world in Guy Fawkes Mass. Remember
right,
that? It was a big, big thing. It started a lot like this, but it morphed into something
but they
real.
didn't trespass, they stayed
That's right. They
outside.
didn't
Right.
trespass. They
They weren't
stopped
breaking
breaking
the
the law
law.
and they just protested. And that's a whole different thing. And it would be amazing if these kids would transform into that and
Right.
not break the law in the process, right? Because that's what we really need to bring attention to this. The way they're doing it, it brings more sympathy to Scientology, and that's not what we
Mm,
want.
yeah, no.
Right. Right. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
But it does
Yeah.
bring attention to it as well.
It,
Both.
it brings attention to the fact that kids are running around in these
Yeah,
buildings.
yeah,
It
yeah.
does not
Right.
bring attention to the actual abuses of Scientology.
No.
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 No, I would
No,
agree.
because
Yeah,
nobody's thinking about that. They're just
that's
watching
right.
these silly videos on TikTok.
And that's
Te
why I say that it's not activism, because activism is specifically is doing that kind of thing so as to deliver a message.
Right.
And that's where it could turn into something great if they would morph it over into that, right?
Okay. Tell us about your book.
Okay, so let me tell you about my book. All right, so I for the last 2 years I've been putting this book together, and it's basically everything I've learned about getting over a destructive cult experience. And having been raised in one, I have a voice, I have opinions, I have ideas, I have stuff that worked for me and that I've used in consulting with many, many, many other people, probably about 200 people or so over all the years I've worked with, who have needed help with some guidance of what do I do? What now? Right?
Yeah.
How do I approach this? I have questions. I don't trauma, ADHD, neurodiversity. I mean, all the psychology questions will just your head explodes trying to figure it all out. And then it's like, well, do you need to get into all of that? Well, maybe for you, you do. Maybe you don't. I was undiagnosed ADHD. I had no idea. And boy, was that throwing me for a loop. So it's not always just trauma. It could be just ignorance of mental health issues and conditions and stuff too. So I kind of try to talk about that in the book. And then there's also matters of like, how do you get along with other people and how do you re acclimate to the real world. You come out of this rigid control system where everything's so certain, everything is so sure. You have answers to all the questions. Everything makes sense. And you come out and suddenly everything is chaotic and confusing and it's just very destabilizing. It's hard to figure out what to hold on to. So I tried to offer some advice about how to find some things to hold on to for yourself. And again, not what I found, just find something for you that's going to work for you. Maybe it's family, maybe it's friends, maybe it's community. And even in community, there are pitfalls, right? Because we enter into the ex cult space and people are fighting all the time. You're like, what is this all about, right? Where's all these fights coming from? Well, when everybody's marching in lockstep, there's no fighting. But then when you come out, you get to start thinking for yourself. So,
Yes.
of course, you're going to disagree with other people. And it feels really weird. It's like, but we're not supposed to fight, but we're fighting. And it's like because you're gaining more of your own independence, right? But you don't,
Yes.
it's very confusing. It certainly was for me.
Mm.
And so I tried again to express some of that in this book and give people some anchors that for their own journey, and that's kind of what this thing is about. I'm recording the audiobook still right now, but the book is out there and you can get it on Amazon or Ingram Spark or, go into a bookstore and
I
ask for
would
it.
love the audio when it comes out because I
Yeah,
just
that's happening. I want to have it done
yeah.
by the end of the month if I can
That's
make that
because as
happen.
a podcaster, that's all I listen to is going to
Yeah.
work or whatever I'm doing around the house is always listening and audiobooks are just fantastic. It's just another way I can read a book in a day but I'm getting other stuff done. Let
Yeah.
me ask you, as the many of the cults that we've interviewed would tell you, especially if they were isolated. Again, I'll pick on the Amish and I'll pick on some of the cults that were maybe in a compound or whatever. If you go outside or go into the real world, to the worldly people, some people call them the English and all this other, you're going to die. You're going to get cancer. You're going to get all sorts of horrible things are going to happen to you. And that scares a lot of them, especially if they were born into the cult and they
Mhm.
really just don't know the real truth. Um, and a lot of them were told they can't look at the internet, you can't look on the news, you can't
Mhm.
whatever. And then all of a sudden they get out. And we've had some people say that they were literally walking the streets. They had no idea. So
Mhm.
do you address that in the book
Mhm.
about how like if you get out, but you just don't you're out, but now what? Like, you have no money, you have no ID. There were people that got out who don't have a Social Security card. They don't have a birth certificate. They have nothing.
Mhm,
So, do you address that?
mhm. Basically, I mean, it's really the advice is go get one. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't have a step by step of how to go get a
Okay.
job because in today's world, it's a
Well,
very
that's a different
rapidly
story.
shifting
Yeah, no.
environment, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I make it very, very clear very early on in this book that the psychological or addressing trauma or addressing critical thinking or addressing emotional intelligence or any of this stuff is all taking a back seat to your basics. If you don't have food, transport, and a place to live, nothing else matters until you do. Nothing
Right.
else.
Right.
There is
Right.
no reason to keep reading a book or, pursue self-actualization or something if your basics aren't covered. So
Right.
this is very, very much in the book, and I refer specifically to Maslow's hierarchy and to the fact that basic needs must be met. I think it's chapter 1 or 2 is
Perfect.
get those under control. And there are a lot of groups, and I try to give some reference to some of them, but there's so many out there, state by
Yeah.
state, that are community minded or support groups for people, as well as online spaces people can go for help. So there's just so many of those out there that I just tell people they exist, and you need to look them up and find them.
Okay. So,
So I know
Mel,
this is going to push us over, Andrew, but I really do want to hear Chris's short version of how and why he left Scientology. We haven't even
oh,
touched
go
on it.
for it. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
really think I want to hear that.
No problem. So I was in the Sea Org for 17 years. It was a rough go. I was physically abused. I was sleep deprived, food deprived. There was one point where I was up for 5 days straight, no sleep. I mean, it was just wild. There were wild times. And there was a 3 year stint on a prison program where it was just hard physical labor 7 days a week. So there was a lot that happened over that time. And I accumulated a lot of doubts and uncertainties about what I was doing. But it was very easy to, sort of be the martyr. And it was very easy to to cling to the moral certainty that what I was doing mattered and I was saving the world. And this was the mindset I was in when I was in Scientology. I did not have the idea it was a money making scam. What I did realize over time, especially over the last 10 years I was in, was just how hyper focused the group was on money. It was just money, money, money all the time and these insane quotas and other things. And that got annoying, but it wasn't enough to make me want to leave. What made me finally break after all of the abuse and the nonsense, and there was just 17 years. There's a lot of it that accumulates in that time. Um, the thing that finally did it for me, though, my moral break with it was this day that I was in. I was on a special project out in Minnesota, of all places, at the church there, and I had been working on door-to-door recovery of Scientologists who had, left the fold or strayed, right? We had their names and numbers. We'd go find them. I'd come knocking on the door. Hey, 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 hi. Haven't been out of the church in a while. What's up? And try to figure out what's going on and resolve any issues or problems. And the more I did that, the more stories I was hearing about how we had just abused the hell out of these people.
Oh,
And over time, you start getting this picture of like, oh, there's a repeating pattern of behavior here, and it's kind of undeniable. And this led to an epiphany one day where I was kind of putting together my to do list for the day. And I was literally, this just kind of like bolt from the blue. It just kind of came out of nowhere. Wait a minute. I was putting this stuff together and I was like, okay, I'm going to have to tell this guy this stuff. And I'm going to have to tell this guy this stuff. And I was like, wait a minute. Hold on. I'm lying to these people. I'm lying. I'm
mm,
lying, 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 right? I'm telling these people that everything's going to get fixed. Everything's going to be better. We're not going to come after your money. But I knew I was lying. I knew the second I got them back in the building, the salespeople were going to descend like vultures on these guys. And it was going to be high pressure sales tactics and it was going to drive them right back out again. And I almost had to like defend my little baby recovery people who I was bringing back in. Don't
right.
don't don't jump on them yet. Let them get back into the mindset first. Anyway, I did this for a few years. I was doing this kind of door-to-door
Mm.
recovery work and other kind of logistics work. And it was just very eye-opening and it put me in a place where I was able to see the negative effects of Scientology from a perspective that many, many, many people in the church never get. They're not knocking on the doors and talking to these people. And this is the damage of Scientology. I was seeing it firsthand. So it had accumulated enough to where I finally realized I was part of the problem. I was enabling this by lying and by selling people on how good it was going to be if they came back. And once I saw that, I'm not on any kind of pedestal or any kind of moral whatever. I'm just saying that my life has been one that has been driven by, wanting to do the right thing, wanting to be a good person, wanting to do the good
Right.
thing. And that's why I was part of Scientology, is I thought I was saving the world. I was really on board with that. And I
Right.
really thought we were making a difference in the society. And so once it really finally hit me, no, that's not what's happening. And guess what? The ends don't justify the means. And it's
Right.
not okay to do this to people. That was the beginning of the end for me. That was really the day that it all turned. And from that point, I think this was 2011,
Okay.
around New Year's. It was always a reflective time for me around New Year's anyway. And, um, and then after that, a very high level member named Debbie Cook sent an email out to like 5,000 people in Scientology telling them that the management was off the rails and they were not following L. Ron Hubbard's orders and directions. And
Yes.
I had to see it. I read the email and I was like, damn, she's right. And it was another eye opener moment. It was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And that was the point where I was like, okay, I need to stop being in the Sea Org, and I'm just going to do Scientology as a public person. I'm just going to go back to that. I'm going to get out of this paramilitary, yes sir, no sir lifestyle. And I'm going to go get a job and have a regular life. And I'm going to do Scientology that way. And after I got out of the Sea Org, it took me about 10 months to get out of there. And
Wow.
once I did, I got on the internet.
Ah.
And that was the real end, because it took me about 3 or 4 months of like deep diving into every aspect of it. And by around May or June of 2013, I was, as they say, physically out, mentally out.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Which is what they use in the
Chemo.
yes, that's right.
Right.
Physically out, but
No.
POMO, right? I was
Pomo.
Pomo.
physically out,
Pomo.
Pomo.
mentally out.
Yes, the
Yes.
pomo.
So I was
Yes.
done. In other words, I was completely done. But I still had all these Scientology connections, my fiance, these various other people. So I tried to play nice for a while, tried to be covert and sort of not let people know what was happening. But I got caught and they figured it out. And so by the end of the year, I was declared suppressive and I was officially booted out of the church. And at that point, I was online spilling the
Right.
secrets and talking about my experiences and stuff like that. So that's kind of how it went down.
Okay. Well, and what that is one of those things that once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it, right?
That's
Then
right.
No.
it's almost like you're just like, oh, I can't believe I saw it that other way when I was in, and you can't go back.
Right? And
You can't go back to that mindset,
you
even though there's
can't.
part of you that kind of thinks, oh gosh, I wish I hadn't figured this out,
That's exactly right.
because now you kind of know all the work you're going to have to do
Especially if you were
to
That's right.
born
to
into it.
untangle everything. Yes,
That's right.
Both of you were born into it, right? So
Yeah. And the
I
second
wasn't
gens,
born in.
yeah, the second
oh, that's
gens
right.
have it rough.
Yeah.
I'm not, again, it isn't trauma Olympics. It's not a matter of who has it worse, but I
Right.
will say that in my experience, it is a longer and more difficult process, mostly speaking. Um, there's always exceptions to this, right? But in general, I would say it's a lot rougher for the second gens, right? Because you just have so much.
Yes.
Because when it's from your childhood and your formative years, and
Yes.
depending on your own personal experience of it, but it's rough to get to unlearn all that stuff.
I do have another question which is going to further this, but it just came to me, and it's something that Melanie and I have been talking about, or I've been asking her about.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna preface it with by a question. So because I can't pronounce the last name. Who is the current leader of Scientology?
David Miscavige,
Okay. His daughter, Jenna,
his
is
niece Jenna.
Niece.
it is
Sorry,
his niece. Okay.
yeah, his
Niece.
brother's daughter.
Okay. She is all over social media speaking
She
out.
is. Yep.
What do you know anything about that?
I know she's on TikTok, and I know that she makes anti-Scientology content
How long has she been out?
since the mid 2000s, I think. I
Okay.
think she wrote a book back then, about her experiences growing up in Scientology, and she got some pretty major media attention at that time, and then she's reappeared recently on TikTok.
Yeah. Okay. Um, we are going to ask you each a question, but before we do, anything that you might have skipped over, missed, or forgot to say, or just would like to say before we wrap it up?
Yeah, fire away, well, this has been fun.
Okay.
Oh, wait, before you I do wanna make one more comment, before Andrews asks his question. I did wanna say too that I do think when you're talking about the trauma too, I think it is harder for Scientologists too, because there is a lot of anti-therapy teachings inside of Scientology too, so that they are almost afraid to get therapy when they come out. So
It's
I
not
just wanted
almost
to throw
afraid,
that
they
in there.
are afraid. They
Yes,
are afraid.
it's
Yeah,
terrifying.
that's right.
So
So the
I just wanted
Yep,
to add that in there.
good point. I wish I'd remembered to bring that up myself. Yes, good point.
See, that's why another ex-cult member would know something like that. Okay. All right. Uh, first question. Now that you're out, I think you said 13 years you're out.
Yeah, I escaped in 2013, so
Where
13 years.
is your faith today?
I would say that for all intents and purposes, I'm pretty faithless. I am not a believer. I don't follow any system of belief in a supernatural power or God figure. It's hard for me to believe in such a thing. I haven't found any system of belief that aligns with how I think about things. There's I have a sort of science-based approach to life, which is not to say that I feel science contradicts faith. I believe they're two different worlds. It's just I live more in a science world than I do in a faith world. And so I am open to the possibility of there being more, because they say, quote unquote, but I don't invest in any path or direction with any certainty. And I'm certainly never going to argue my faith with anybody else as to what I think might happen after we die. I think a lot of things happen after we die, as they say. I just am not here for it. So
Right.
I think it's that kind of a thing,
Yeah, none of us are, and I don't think that'll be one question I think humanity will never know the answer to until they
Nope,
get there
Right.
themselves, and that's if there is a consciousness after that.
that's
Melody,
right.
you're up.
Yes, I love that answer, by the way, Chris, because
Me too.
I think very similar, and I really think that when you're in an organization where you think you have all the answers and you come out, you have to learn to be comfortable to say, "I don't know," and that's okay.
That a video that I made just a few years after leaving Scientology that I still consider to be one of the most important lessons I ever learned was that the 3 hardest words for anybody to say is, "I don't know."
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right? And
It's
it's just
not.
hard. It is hard for people to deal with that.
It
But it's a
is.
humbling thing when you can and when you can accept it and really, like, even savor it, even like, "Yeah, I don't know, but I wanna learn," it's
Yes,
that's such a
exactly.
great place to be.
It is, because it leaves you more open-minded, more, willing to learn new things and new
Yes.
ideas.
Yeah.
My question, Chris, is that if there's anybody listening that maybe even is currently in Scientology or some other group where they're starting to have doubts, about what they believe, what would be your words of advice to them?
Find out more. Simply find out more. If you're in any situation at all, do you have and do you give yourself the freedom to think whatever thought you want to think? Is that okay or not? And if it's not okay, I would suggest asking why.
Yeah.
Because they're thoughts. We have a million of them every day. We should be able to have an unlimited number of them. They're just thoughts. So if somebody is telling you or ordering you to not think certain things, not say certain things, not look into certain things, I would suggest they don't have your best interests at heart and maybe
Yeah.
look into that a little bit more deeply and find out more. It's just knowledge. It's not going to hurt
Yes.
you.
No.
I love that. I love that answer.
And today, knowledge is more accessible, whereas 10, 15, 20 years ago, if you were in a cult, you couldn't Google, Scientology and get negative information, or you couldn't Google JW, any of them.
That's
Yes.
right.
Today, it's just not even, you don't even need a computer. You just need a cell phone and you'll get the information
Yes.
you want.
And we had a previous guest say one time that if your religion can't be questioned, perhaps it's time to question your religion. And I
That's a
thought that
great
was a
I
really
love
good
that.
quote.
Wonderful
Yes.
quote. Yes.
Yes.
Because really at the end, one of the most valuable lessons I've learned throughout my entire life is exactly that. There
Yes.
should not be any limits on questions you can ask.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Well,
All
Chris,
right.
we can't thank you enough.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, this was fun.
It was. It was. We really enjoyed having you.
Good luck with your book. And again, the name
Yes.
of the book is
What Now? A Practical Guide to Life After a Cult. And it's available on
available
Amazon,
on,
Ingram Spark, and wherever books are sold.
and the audio version will be coming soon.
Yes.
All right. Okay, Chris, the best of
Thank
luck.
you.
Thank you very much. It was fun.
And
Oh,
once again, we want to thank Chris so much for coming on the show and enlightening us, talking about his book, teaching us more about Scientology, and just what a fun, great conversation.
okay. I yes, agree 100%. And I am, and Melody, you did say something about you were a little bit celebrity shock, or what is that in awe?
Yeah, I said I
I,
felt like I met like a cult celebrity
I
because I remember Chris from when he was on the Leah Remini Scientology, The Aftermath.
yeah,
So
me too. I've known about Scientology all my life and didn't care until I got into the podcasting and the cult investigation.
right,
And in the beginning, and I don't know if we ever said this on air, we were told stay away by
yeah,
other podcasts. Our
yes,
colleagues said don't, and that was a little over 2 years ago. Well, as people may know what's going on in the news, and apparently, like JW, people are fleeing Scientology. Maybe not in droves, but it's
right,
not as the dark, deep, the men in white, the black jackets, whatever,
right.
anymore. It's just not. And when we had the opportunity for Chris to come on, we jumped at it. We just said, out of 120 episodes now,
Yeah,
I don't.
30,
Well, by the time this airs, we have not had one Scientologist. So
right.
I gotta keep saying that,
Ex-Scientologist.
ex-Scientologist,
Yes,
and I'm just blown away by that. And Chris, thank you so much.
yes,
You were energetic, lively, well spoken,
yes.
and I can't wait till his audiobook comes out.
Oh, I agree. I agree. And I will say that I think Chris said this before we were recording about too. The other thing is that so many people are starting to speak out about cults, including Scientology,
Yep.
that they just can't keep up with every TikTok account, every podcast, every
You can't.
social media page. They cannot keep up with everything. So they can't sue everyone, basically is what it boils down to. So, but we so enjoyed having him on. It was just very, very enlightening. And Chris, we can't thank you enough. And thank you to all of you for listening as well. As always, thank you for listening to Cultimatum. We truly appreciate your support as we work to expose the truth and highlight the voices of these survivors.
If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to rate and review us on Apple and Spotify. It helps more people discover the podcast, creating a greater awareness. And don't forget to follow, share, and keep tuning in to our latest episodes.
You can also follow Cultimatum on Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and YouTube for extra content and updates.
And be sure to join our Facebook community, Cultimatum Podcast, where we continue the conversations and keep you posted when new episodes drop.
And if you're a cult survivor looking for additional support and connection, we invite you to join the Facebook group Cult Escape and Healing.
You can also find more information about the show, including our full legal disclaimer, on our websites at cultimatumpodcast.com or anonymousandrewpodcaststudios.com.
And if you have a story related to cults or human trafficking that you'd like to share, you can reach us at cultimatumpodcast@gmail.com.
And if you'd like to support the show, You can do that by using the link in the show notes called Buy Us a Cup of Coffee. Your support helps cover production costs and allows us to keep bringing these important stories to light.
And as always, stay safe, stay informed, and remember, you are not alone.